Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends, and thanks as always for tuning in today. We're glad that you're here. And I have a unique guest for you guys today. His name is Jon Schoeller, and he is out of Charleston, West Virginia. And this guy is pretty interesting and amazing. He's a mega entrepreneur since the age of 21, and he has launched into some flipping houses and buy and hold at a large scale level with a couple of partners. And we're going to dig in a little bit into all kinds of things like how to build passive income through real estate, how to identify opportunities, etc. And it's going to be fun. So Jon, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So we always like to start from the beginning. You and I were chatting earlier about your backstory, which is pretty interesting. So tell us a little bit about how you found your way into real estate investing, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, so yeah, as I was telling you before we got on the show here, I stumbled upon my partners, and I say that because it's really random how we got together. I've always owned businesses prior, and I had sold those, and I wanted to get into real estate investing. And my wife got accepted into school here in Charleston, West Virginia. And when we were on the way here, well, about a month, 2 months before we came here, I started looking up local investors in the area. Because prior to that, we were doing travel nursing with my wife. She was a travel nurse. And when she got accepted into nurse anesthesia school, I said, you know what, we're going to be there for a while. Let me find some investors in that area and just network with them a little bit so that way I can hit the ground running. Well, as soon as I got here, about 2 weeks after that, I met up with one of my partner, Andrew, who's partners with Steve in a company that I joined up, in a company that I joined up with. And I sat down with him at a local McDonald's. I told him what I wanted to do. And he told me what they were doing. And I said, well, can I shadow you guys one day? And they said, sure. So I met up with them about a week or two later to shadow with them. And like I was telling you, that was 2.5 years ago now. And now we are all three partners in this company. And we've been going in strong ever since.
So when you say that you shadowed them, what exactly did you shadow them doing?
So I just said, hey guys, I just want to follow you around one day, look at some of the homes you're investing on, how you do it, who you get on your projects, how you manage this whole system. And they said, sure. And I was just riding around with them for the day. And that's when I kind of opened it up and said, this is what I'm looking to do. I have a little bit of money. And they were like, well, let's talk. And so we sat down in the office probably 2 or 3 days after that, just sitting through meetings. And then I said, well, I'll just stick around. And I could fit this role pretty well if it's open for me. And it's almost like a very informal agreement that I just stuck around, and they just had me around. And it probably was a little weird, but it kept, after about a month or two, I was just partner. They started calling me partner. I started calling them partner. When people asked who owned the company, it was all three of us. And then we started talking about it a little bit more. And of course, with a partnership, it can always get a little bit tricky. It wasn't all roses from the get-go. We all had our differences and how we should operate, how the company should look. And we probably fought on that for about a year. We were still growing in the meantime and working on the business, but it took a good year and a half for us to all like sync up. And all three of us would admit that. But once we all had our heads together, we really have hit the ground running here in about the last, I'd say 6 months to a year. And it's been looking up ever since.
So how did you find these guys to begin with, and what was their business model? Like, what were you looking for?
So like I said, they had been together for about 5 years prior to me, 4 years prior to me. They've been together about 6 years total, 2.5 with me on board. And prior, it was Andrew had a company and Steve had a company, and they met through a house that Andrew was selling, and Andrew was selling that house to Steve, and they bought it. And then I think after that, they did a house together. And then Steve had a connection for an investor, and that investor, who's still our biggest investor now, he funds probably 80% of our projects, if not 85%. Steve brought him with them, and then through that, they started probably doing about 4 or 5 houses a year, and then 15, 20, 30, and it kept growing. By the time I met up with them, they were probably doing about 25 houses a year. And since then, we've probably done closer to 85 homes. Maybe 90 homes together.
Now, when you say did the homes, are you talking about strictly flips?
Correct. Through that company, we are doing strictly flips. Some of them are wholesale, so we never touch it. We buy it and sell it to another investor, or we get extremely fortunate at an auction and we buy the house and it needs cleaned, and then we put it right back up. But that's 1 out of 20.
So let me ask you something. Okay, so you mentioned that you had a couple companies before, and then you sold a company, and that was right when you knew you were moving to Charleston. Is that correct?
Somewhat. So at 21 years old, I started a moving company. I told you a little bit about that. Grew that. It became the biggest, if not the number one company in the area I was in. So it did really well. And then I sold that to a friend of mine when I was leaving. I kind of owner financed it to him, if you will. And then when we left, my wife and I traveled nurse for almost 2 years. We went to California. We went to Maui. We went to Northern Virginia. We spent most of that time in California. I think we did 3 assignments there. So that was about 9 months total. During that time, I was researching and reading as much as I could on real estate. I had some money saved up, and I knew that's where I wanted to go with my money, both for capital building and for passive income. So in the meantime, she applied to nurse anesthesia school, got accepted here in Charleston, West Virginia, and that's when I started Facebook and YouTube looking up people that were here. And Steve and Andrew had a podcast at the time, and we're pretty active on Facebook, and that's how I found them and reached out to them via Facebook message, I believe. And I already had that meeting pretty much set up by the time we got here.
Okay. So what got you thinking, like, you're like, okay, I've got some money saved up and I want to invest in real estate. Did you know that you right away wanted to get into flipping, or do you have a background in anything construction related, or were you just kind of like, I know I want to invest in real estate somehow, some way, and these guys seem like they know what they're doing?
Well, it was a few things. I've always loved finding a deal and selling it. So I had probably 2 or 3 other companies when I was in Charlottesville. Everybody knows me or knows my business success was the moving company. But I also bought and sold used motorcycles, street bikes. I also rented an entire warehouse for 8 months, and I would buy tractor trailer loads full of mattresses and sell them. I also did that with furniture. And I was always about finding the deal at discount and selling it. And just naturally that escalates to real estate.
Yeah.
And real estate was scary for me. I'm a conservative investor. I am very conservative. Well, it's funny. I'm actually growing out of that now. But when you first found me, you couldn't get $1 from me, right? I was very conservative. Unless I knew the deal was going to work, I probably wasn't going to invest. And so fast forward now, I hold probably 7 or 8 houses at a time sometimes, just personally, that I'm invested on. And so I've gotten pretty progressive with my investing. But yeah, so naturally I just escalated to real estate, but I found Bigger Pockets. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And I found them on YouTube and their forum, and I just started researching as much as possible. And then I found the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. And with all that came together, I said, you know what, I need to be in real estate. In some way, shape, or form, I just need to get into real estate, both for capital building through the flips and both for holding long-term for passive income. And I said, how do I do this, right? I don't know much about real estate. I don't know anything about construction. And this is what holds a lot of people back. And so if I had to give a tip right now to anybody, is fine, you don't know that stuff, right? But somebody does. And you have something that somebody doesn't. I don't care if it's money, time, knowledge, marketing, something. You have something that they don't, and they have something that you don't. So partner up. Yes, you won't make as much as first, and yes, they may be bringing a ton more, so you might only get 10% of the deal. But it's the knowledge you gain from partnering up with somebody. And that's where I was extremely fortunate with Steve and Andrew, them letting me come on board. Of course, I had things that they needed as well, but they didn't have to join up with me. And they babied me through my first deal, if you will. And my first deal was a $110,000 purchase. So it's huge, right? I went from, buying $5,000 and $7,000 motorcycles and flipping those. And the mattress warehouse, the trucks full of that was like $15,000, but to a $110,000 investment. And I couldn't sleep. The first deal, I couldn't sleep. I tell the story to everybody. I was in the shower one time. I called my wife in there and said, I've done screwed up. I'm losing our money here, right? Because it fell out of contract the first time I went into contract. So I was like, it's never going to sell. This is the worst deal I've ever done. But of course it sold, and we made like $40,000 on that first deal total in the company. And Rhiannon and I got a third of that. So we did well.
Awesome. So a couple questions I have. You mentioned Bigger Pockets podcast, which I love and I follow. And also you mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which ironically was the first book ever given to me in 2006. My first manager in the lending world gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad and said, you just went from employee to self-employed. Now you need to become investor and business owner. What other influences do you remember having? Any other books that you would recommend for folks that are just they know they want to put their money into some vehicles that will bring a return, but, don't know where to begin. Any other inspirations that you could share?
You got the classics. You got Think and Grow Rich, Millionaire Next Door, The Richest Man in Babylon. I also enjoy, and Jon Schoeller Consulting is a company I own, and I do a lot of financial advising. Sorry, not financial advising, financial consulting. You need a license for the other one. I do a lot of that for both businesses and individuals. Actually, probably my number one passion is finances, saving, retirement, building that retirement fund, and then FIRE, if you're familiar with FIRE, financial independence, retire early.
Mm-hmm.
I love helping people get to that. But those books were really key to my success and inspiration. But another one for me was Grant Cardone's 10X.
Yep.
Yeah. So he's a lot for a lot of people, but he can motivate you. And that book was written really well.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's another question I have for you is that you mentioned, what did you say? It's FIRE. What does FIRE stand for?
So FIRE it's huge on the Reddit community. I think that's where it got started, but it's short for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So
talk to me about your motivators here. Like, first of all, what is your background like that you are so freakishly entrepreneurial, if you will?
I don't do well with authority, and I figured that out at a young age. I was probably 18, 19. I had the job. I started working when I was probably old enough to get a permit. What's that, 13 and a half, 14, something like that. And I started off at Dairy Queen and Burger King. And then I washed dishes, and I worked at a golf course, and I did all that till I was like 19, 20, and I hated it. I wasn't a good employee at all, and I never was going to be. I either was constantly thinking of a better way to do your job or an easier way to do it so I could get paid but not work as hard, right? I was trying to figure out a system so that I could do it easier, or I just didn't want to be there. And I felt like I was constantly earning for somebody else, and I never got it. And I wasn't very good at school. A lot of people say that's not true. Well, it is true. I was ranked like 144 out of 186 students. Yeah. It wasn't because I was not smart. I just was bored. I was really bored in school. I finished my test before everybody else, and good grade or bad grade, I just was like, I wanted to get out of there. And, I spent a lot of time in school suspension. As you can tell, I probably talk fast, but I'm just very hyper. A lot of anxiety driven, and just have to be in control. And so at 2021, I was working for that company that got a little bit behind, and I was like, you know what, this is it. This is my chance to take control of my freedom, my own income, and make it or break it. At least I'm in control. And that was huge for me, and I could never look back. I'll never work for anybody again.
So what does retire early mean to you? I mean, do you feel like, it's funny that you had mentioned the Bigger Pockets podcast, because, and the reason I had you on the show is you're not selling real estate. You're not a real estate agent. You're an investor in our realm of real estate. And I find myself being very inspired with folks that are finding ways to put their money into vehicles to create an income that could replace an income you have to work for so hard. So what is your definition of freedom, and what is your timeline for having freedom? Are you already there? Where are you headed from here? What is your goal?
So that's a great question. And I get this asked a lot. Yes, technically my wife and I could probably hang it up, if you will. I did it for a couple years when she did the travel nursing, but it's a hoax for most. Retire early, by definition, retirement for me is not realistic. When you talk about margaritas on the beach and just laying by the ocean all day, good luck. I did this in Maui. People were like, you got it made. Your wife's making excellent income. You've got a bunch of money saved up. And I was like, oh, that's great, but you got to be working on something. But I think what retire early means for us now is do what we want when we want, but still working on what we want. And so for me and her, we agreed on this, that we just want to get to a place in our life that we can travel as much as we want, give back as much as we want, and not have to worry about having to do something. I think that's the key difference is going to work because you have to and going to work because you want to. That would be my definition of retirement. And so the ways we do that now is we're really heavy on our retirement accounts, our Roth and our 401k. And truthfully, because we're still in a big capital building stage, probably building more capital than most would understand, but we want to buy lots of units at once for our passive income. We don't want a nickel and dime. Not saying it's wrong, and it might be right for most people to buy a unit here, buy a unit there, refinance and all that. But we want to buy a 20, 30, 40, 50 unit complex right out the gate so that way they can self-manage. And so that's what we're working towards.
Okay. So working towards getting like a full apartment building, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. So now I want to back up a little bit. Like I said, one of the reasons I had you on the show is because I'm often inspired by folks that are creating that passive income in an industry like real estate, where for many of us, earning more means working more. And this is one of the challenges we have with freedom. And, you know, the name of this podcast is Pursuing Freedom for a reason. And for me, the idea of freedom means time and financial freedom, that if I didn't want to work another day, I wouldn't have to, because I have enough passive income paying for all of our expenses and some. But like you, I don't ever see myself not doing something because I would go crazy. But then the time freedom is huge too, because what's the point of making great money if you're compromising your health and your relationships and everything else? And so I feel like what I see a lot of is folks that are kind of surviving success in real estate. So as like when you're hungry and you're building your business and you're freaking out and stressed out and desperate and you're not making any money, you're just hustling and you're hungry. And when it all clicks, you start making really good money. And you're so nervous about going back to being broke that you just suck it up and you work the long hours. And so I would like you to speak a little bit about, like, when folks are making that kind of income that has them also working really long hours, what would be some advice that you've seen in your buy and hold experience, in your flipping experience, as a way for folks to get their money invested into some vehicles like this, whether or not they feel savvy about flipping or not? Does that make sense? Like, I feel like we have, when you hit your stride in this business, we have the opportunity to generate a great income. But then the question is, well, what are you going to do with that money so that you don't have to work these crazy hours indefinitely to continue to maintain this level of income?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of my clients fail on this question. I always ask them, what's your most valuable asset? And that's time, right? And we're all at some point trading our time for money. That's essentially what you're doing. You know, anytime you go to work, you answer that phone call, you answer that email, you're essentially trading your time for money. And you have to ultimately decide what is enough for you and what's good enough for you. And that's a personal question to everybody. So, you know, we got to, people like us who believe that eventually you do need to trade off your money for your time. You got to get your money working for you. That's not going to be the answer for everybody. Like Gary Vaynerchuk, for some reason, if you follow him at all, that dude's he doesn't care how much money he's making. He's just always going to trade his time. And that's because that's what he ultimately loves. But I think the answer for most people is they want to have more time with their family, more time with their kids, more time to spend vacationing, whatever that case may be. And we're all in that stage at first where you're trading all your time for money. And then what you're asking is, when should you or how should you eventually trade off your money to get your time back? And that is a transition. I think that, again, it's individual depending on when you want to do that, but you need to focus on that, or else time flies. All of a sudden you're 55 and you're still putting in 60-hour weeks. And yes, you might make $300,000 a year, $400,000 a year, but you're working 60-hour weeks still. Now, if that makes you happy, truly, you can't just say that it does make you happy. It truly makes you happy, then keep doing that. But if you're miserable, then it's not worth that. It's no longer worth that. And probably 10 years ago, it wasn't worth it. You need to hit the panic button now and figure out how to invest that money so that it can go to work for you. Like every dollar is a soldier, right? And how do you get every one of those dollars to go off to war for you, go off to work for you, so they can make that money for you. And what I would start looking at as a real estate agent is real estate. You are surrounded with it. You are surrounded with the king of passive income. And not only that, but you have knowledge that most people who are looking to start investing their money don't have the options to get to. You have a network, you have intelligence, you know what a deal is in your area. So you might not have that money saved up, right? Even if you're making good money, we know how it is. The money's going back into your business. It's going to your mortgage, your kids' college, whatever the case may be. But you can go find investors that have the money. You know how to find the deals. You can find the deals. And also what's nice about that is you're the real estate agent, so you can get the kickback. You know, you can either reduce your percentage or keep it, whatever the case may be, split it with the investor. But you have access to the market, and the real estate agent the investor might not. Now y'all partner up and start getting homes and building a rental portfolio together, or flips, whatever. Flips is passive too. Look, passive is a weird thing, right? There's nothing truly passive. If you invent something and get mailbox money, sure. But everything is going to be managed at some point, especially at the beginning. But whether you're flipping houses or you're buying long-term for rental income, either way, look for partners that help you through this. And as a real estate agent, you have an edge that most people don't have.
So you mentioned something I wanted to ask you about, which is money. So, you know, obviously you came into it with a nest egg from the sale of your businesses, and you were ready to do something with that money. What's your advice for someone in terms of what do you think is the barrier to entry? I mean, can somebody save up $5,000 and look for people that they might know that are investing in real estate and simply participate in an investment? Or do you think there's a minimum amount you need to think about having before you start buying and investing in real estate?
So let's not get caught up in the no money down, all the tactics, like zero money to start in real estate. Nah, it's kind of true. But you need to market yourself. You need to know, so you're going to have some money in it. You're going to have money to drive around for gas to look for deals, right? But as far as like bringing money to the table, you might not have to. You just find the deal, right? We would partner with somebody that has the deal. They already have the deal. They even inherited the house. They know how to find it for cheap, whatever the case may be. If you bring us the deal, we'll bring all the money and split it, because otherwise we wouldn't have found that deal. But you need a network of some kind. You need to have somebody that has money. So yeah, it's possible as a wholesaler to not have any money in these deals, right? Are you familiar with the wholesaling?
No, I would love for you to dig in a little bit.
So this is how I would suggest almost everybody get started if you don't have money. But basically a wholesaler is somebody that can find the deals. They get a contract with the seller. And let's say that your aunt wants to sell her house and she doesn't want to put it on the market, or it won't sell in the market. It needs a roof. It needs repairs. It's not going to sell. Okay. So you say, all right, look, Aunt Sally, I'll buy your house for $10,000 from you. And you put a contingency contract with her for that $10,000. And you say, give me 30 days to bring one of my investors on. And then you come to me, I'm in the investor, and you say, hey, I have this house. I'll sell it for $25,000 to you. And it's still a good deal to me. I don't care that you're making a $15,000 margin on it. You should be honest. You will lose investors if you're not. That's where wholesalers get caught up. They lie to the seller. They lie to the investor. Be honest. Everybody knows how this works now. And if they're good investors, they should not care how much money you're making, as long as their numbers work. If they want to get prideful, move on to the next investor. So, all right, so now you've got the contract for $10,000. We're going to go to the closing table. I'm going to write you a check for $25,000. 10 of that's going to go to your Aunt Sally to buy her house. And then you get a check for $15,000. You just made $15,000 and you never brought a dollar to the table. You didn't work on the house. You just brought it to me. And I'm okay with it because I've got the house for 25. I'm going to put 25 in it and sell it for 80.
So how do the wholesalers tend to find these opportunities?
So you're going to drive for dollars for one. You're going to ride around. You're just drive around neighborhoods, good, decent neighborhoods. You know, the old saying, you want to find the worst house in the best neighborhood. Right? Don't find the best house in the worst neighborhood, and don't find the worst house in the worst neighborhood. Right? Find a good middle income area, right? And draw around for sale by owner signs, or what you want to look for. They're everywhere. That means they're not on the market. Usually if they're on the market and somewhere like you live in Denver or near Denver, everybody's seen it. All the investors have already seen it. The for sale by owners, you can do mailers. So you can hire a company to send out mailers, and they just send a letter to all the homes that are vacant properties, right? There's multiple ways to do this. If you just go to biggerpockets.com and search how to wholesale, there's multiple ways to do this. And then you get all those leads together. You call them. You figure out how much they want. You walk the property. And at first, you're going to suck at this. You're going to be, I don't know how much to offer this. I don't know how to talk to them. It doesn't matter. Go. Talk to as many of these people as you can. Get a budget list. And you can find these all over the internet as well. Again, on Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets is where you need to be if you're doing this anyway.
Yeah.
Get that budget list. Go through these houses. Tell your investors. You're going to find investors by going to real estate meetings. All right? Real estate investor meetings. Go to meetup.com. You're going to go to these meetings. You're going to take your leads with you. You're going to have some business cards so you at least look legit. And you could be, Sally real estate investor. And technically you are at this point. Or a lead generator, whatever you want to call yourself. Bring them all the leads. If they hit on one or two, now you start building a relationship. And look, you might want to give your first one away. A lot of people get stuck on making money in your first deal. You might be stuck on that forever. I don't care if you lose $5,000 on your first deal, because guess what? Now people pay all the time $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 for a seminar that's not hands-on. I'd rather pay $5,000 and be hands-on and learn the hard way. So let's say you find the deal and your investor is like, I'll give you $200 on that deal. Sold. Let's lock it up. You made $200. You locked your first deal in, but more importantly, you built a deal with an investor that you can keep bringing deals to, right? And you want to find 2, 3, 4, 5 investors in your area. And remember, they don't have the time anymore. See, they're smart now. They're trading off their money for their time. So they'll pay you $15,000 to bring them your aunt's house because they don't want to drive around all day. You got the time right now. See the trade-off?
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on people getting into this when they've got another job? Like, I mean, do you think this is something that somebody could jump into and be like, this is going to be my career. I'm going to go dive in both feet and, sink or swim kind of thing? Or do you think it's something you can do as a side hustle?
You could do this. All right. I often do say you do part-time work, you get part-time results. And that's just true. I mean, that's no matter what you do for a while. Once you become proficient, you can start working part-time and get the original results. But how bad do you want this? That's the question for everybody. Has more time in the day than they say. If you got Netflix on your TV, if you got Facebook on your phone, you have more time in the day. And that's just being brutally honest. Look, I get caught up in that. I watch Netflix, I have Facebook, but I'll make sure my priorities are in line. I promise you this, I would not have Netflix if I didn't have the income from my properties or I wasn't investing. I'd put that to the side. So you got to decide what's more important to you and what do you want to work on in your spare 4 or 5 hours that you have in the evening. And look, everybody's got kids and you might not have time, but I challenge almost everybody. You can find 2 hours in the day, or you could lose a few hours of sleep a night for about 6 months if you really want to figure this out.
Okay. Well, let me ask you one last question here, and that is in regards to geography. Do you feel like your geographical location in Charleston, West Virginia, played a part in your ability to build such an aggressive portfolio? Because do you feel like it's harder to do in high cost markets, or do you feel, I don't know anything about the cost of Charleston. You just mentioned $110,000 investment, which would be hard to come by, for example, in Denver metro area where, a lot of our listeners are. So what are your thoughts on that? If you live in a place like San Francisco that's really expensive, should you be exploring markets that are lower barrier entry to get into and get going on?
If I was a new investor, I would try to stay local because I know the area, especially if I'm a real estate agent. You really know your area, right? You can probably eyeball a house and tell what that would sell for within $10,000, even if it was in bad condition. Another area, you're going to have to trust somebody else. And that's where you rely on professionals, such as my company, who has a track record. We've flipped 80, 90 homes now. Obviously, we kind of know what we're doing over here. And you invest with us, right? That's definitely an option. You find people doing it in that area. You hand them your money. You're not going to make as much, but your hands off, right? Our investors do zero work. They wire us money. We wire it back. And that's how it works. And that's definitely an option. And yes, to answer your question, we have our advantages in our area because we can buy $10,000 homes, right? Like you guys can't find that. We bought a home the other day for $10,000 and it's livable. And you won't find that in many other spots of the country. We bought a home the other day for $55,000. It's 3,500 square feet.
Oh,
it's got a two-car garage with a mother-in-law suite out back. And we're going to have to put $50,000 into it. And it will be worth $200,000, $250,000. We won't sell it for that because we're going to do a quick turn, but those are the options in our area. Now, keep in mind, we have to deal with less work, how do I say this? Less skilled workers or less, I don't know how I can put this. We don't have as many great contractors as you might find in your area. You have a lot of competition. So in your area, you have to be an outstanding roofer every single time to get any work. Otherwise, you're never going to get work. Well, here we have like 8 roofers to choose from, and they could all be okay. And so we deal with that constantly. You always have your trade-offs. But if you're going to want to buy, if you want to stretch your dollar, buy here, but understand your margins aren't going to be as big. Sure. We buy a $10,000 house, we sell it for $35,000, $40,000. Maybe we make $20,000 after realtor and fees and all that. You can buy a $350,000 house, put $150,000 in it, so you're all in for $500,000. If my math is right there, you're all in for $500,000. You can list it for $799.
Right.
we will never see those margins, right? And we could never sell a house. If we bought a house and tried to sell it for $500,000, we'd sit on it for over a year.
Awesome.
Plus and minuses.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I love it. What do you see for the future? I mean, where are you headed in the next 3 to 5 years? So just curious about what do you have on the horizon besides doing more of the same and maybe at a faster pace?
That's pretty much it. We're going to keep building this. We're starting the new company, which is a holding company of all the other companies we have. And then that will be our brand. And then we want to start a fund. So A&M Investments will eventually bring in outside money from wherever we advertise to. And we want to build, our goal is to build a $10 to $20 million fund, portfolio fund, to constantly churn that money and constantly find these houses to invest. We want to invest in more commercial stuff, bigger condos, high rise, stuff like that. And then we also want to build more holding properties. That's where we really want to end up in about 10 years. We want to stop building capital so quickly and start holding more properties. We're going to kick ourselves in 15 years that we didn't hold a lot of this stuff, but that's just the position we're in right now. We're still building capital so that one day we don't have to use that money to quickly flip. We can hold these things 10, 15 years and have much more passive income down the road.
Sure. All right. I love it. Well, if folks want to get in touch with you to learn more, pick your brain, figure out about the possibility of maybe becoming an investor, I mean, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So there's multiple ways. The most popular way right now is Instagram and YouTube. It's just my name, Jon Schoeller. On Instagram, I'm constantly doing stories behind the scenes, investing, walking through properties, what we paid for properties. And then my YouTube is my money management side. I also do vlogs on there. So I walk you through a whole property we bought till we sold it, how we bought it at auction, but I also teach people how to manage their money so that they can do this. That's step one. You got to be able to manage the money first. Even if you're wholesaling, you got to take that $15,000 you made from that investment and learn how to use it to start buying your own properties.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today and sharing all this wisdom. I hope that the listeners out there have their wheels turning and are feeling as inspired as I am to go make our money work for us, right? So thanks everyone for tuning in. As always, I appreciate you guys. I love having your support and your feedback. And as always, if you're enjoying the content, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or iTunes and leave a review because it helps us continue to attract amazing guests like Jon here. And yeah, thanks again, Jon. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Have a great day, everybody.